everybody, and welcome to Talks on Tuesdays, where we discuss a variety of spiritual, paranormal, outre, and strange ideas, strange to the average person, in a friendly environment. And welcome to you who are joining us live on Zoom, and of course, to our recorded audience on YouTube. And today, as you know, it is our Halloween special. So I hope you have all come equipped with stories to tell and interesting stuff. I'm going to start by telling you a story that I have heard since the time I was a little girl. And it's my grandmother's story, and she was the daughter of Norwegian immigrants, and she lived up in a little tiny town in Minnesota. And when it was time for her to go to school, they had to send her into town, and she boarded with the Norwegian witch. And so she came into my life knowing how to read cards and tell ghost stories and read tea leaves and premonitions and dreams. But this is a story that she used to tell us in front of the fireplace. And it is a story of growing up in the wilds of Minnesota, where one of their neighbors had tried to make a go of it with farming. And he found he just couldn't make it. A lot of the immigrants came to Minnesota, and some did well, and some just never made anything. So he and his wife and kids decided that they were going to leave, and they had an old dog, and they knew that the dog would not be able to make the trip back to where they came from. And so he shot the dog, and he buried it under the floorboards of the house. And years later, when my grandma and her siblings were little children, they were walking home from school, and they decided to cut through that land, even though they had been told not to. And they soon found out why. And that was because there was a bull who was being pastured on that land. And the bull spotted them, and it came right towards them with its horns pointed down. And they ran and ran and ran, and they were crying and screaming, trying to get to the fence. And then one of them heard a bark. And from the old cabin, the dog jumped through the window and ran and got the bull's attention and distracted it till they could get on the other side of the fence. And they ran home and they told their parents about it. And Grandma said, my parents' eyes got very big. He said, yes, there was a dog that lived in that house who protected the children. And the children all looked at each other, and they always told that story again. And we listened to it all the time in front of the fireplace with her. And it was one of my favorite ghost stories. So I'm going to invite you, if you want to share your stories. And we've got 25 more minutes. So let's see. It doesn't have to be a story. It could just be an incident. I know, Barb, I think you arrived with some things to share, didn't you?
I did, but yeah, I'd just as soon hear what others have to say.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a great story,
Oh, thank you.
Mary. I loved it.
Well, it really always gave me the chills when I was
Oh,
growing
yeah.
up.
And you can hear it over and over again. As a kid, I can imagine. It must have been awesome.
Grandma, tell us about the ghost dog.
Quick question. I missed the first 1 minute or so, computer issues. How was this introduced that then Mary told this story? What is this about?
Oh, it's Halloween special, so we are just kind of telling ghost stories or anything else that you think is strange or seasonal that you would like to share with us.
And it's based in something that actually someone experienced?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Christine,
it came with quite a few, and it was difficult for me to decide which one to tell. So I'll just tell this one. That they're all decent, but I lived in a condo with my daughter and a ex-boyfriend of mine, and I was in the bed for bed. I was already in bed, and I heard this scuttling and scurrying up the wall, and I could follow the sound with my eyes. And I was following it up over the closet doors and down the hall. And I thought, okay, it sounded pretty big, and I thought it could be, you know, maybe a rat inside the walls or something. There was other things that would go on in this place too, but within just a few minutes of hearing that sound, my daughter's yelling for me, terrified. I could hear it in her voice, terrified. I get up and go in there, and she said, I woke up. I thought it was you. I was looking at you, but it wasn't you. Somebody in a dark cloak was standing over my bed. Kind of freaked me out. It wasn't the we would experience in that place. The TV in Dalen's room would come on to static, and it was one of those little tiny TVs that you could put a DVD into the top of it. And I always did my workout videos on that, so it should have been a blue screen, but it would come on to static, just randomly come on. Yeah, weird stuff would go on in that place.
Yeah.
What did you attribute that to, Christine?
I don't know. I mean, because I've experienced other things in other places, like a bedroom door in a home my ex-husband and Dalen and I used to live in. The door in our master bedroom would, you know, swing open and close, and then I would hear a baby crying, and went to check in on Dalen. She was, you know, little at the time, maybe 2, still in a crib, and she'd be sound asleep. And I told my ex-husband, I said, I don't know if you believe in ghosts, but something's going on in the house. He said, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't want to hear about it. But then one night he woke up, and he, you know, kind of shoved me on the arm and said, Dalen's crying. You need to go check on her. I said, that's not Dalen. Maybe you should go check on her. So he went checking on her, came back and said, no, that's not Dalen. I said, I told you so. So I believe in ghosts. There was another time in Beaverton. I was living there in an apartment with the same boyfriend in this condo that we all lived in. We lived in an apartment on the other side of town. And he would work nights, and sometimes at night the first time I heard it, it freaked me out. I heard footsteps, woke me up, footsteps on the carpet. Woke up, sound sleep, my eyes, I'm trying to adjust my eyes to the dark. I'm thinking somebody's in the house. I'm trying to figure out how they could get in, because I always lock the doors, every single one of them, before I went to bed. Like, there's no way that anybody could get in this house without waking me up first. I would have heard a door being busted down. So I was like, okay, it's got to be a big creature, but it doesn't sound like a big raccoon. And if it were a raccoon, it wouldn't be able to get into the house. I'm still trying to process this in my sleep. Got up, turned the lights on, walked around, nothing was there. Another evening, it had to have been a Saturday, because he had Saturdays and Sundays off. He woke up to the sound of footsteps on the carpet, woke me up. And I said, yeah, I know, I've been hearing that too. So I've had so many experiences like this. I do believe there are ghosts. So.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll say spirits who don't know they're dead.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah. I think you go into the afterlife with certain expectations. And they, like all expectations, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you don't know you're dead, you kind of stick around.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, that actually reminded me of a situation And I hadn't even thought about this until just now when I heard you say about spirits who don't know they're dead, because I've been connected with spirits who I think do know they're dead. They know but they were there. They came in, some old friends, and but that's a different one I was going to talk about though. But a kind of a distant cousin of mine came to town. This is when I was living in Pittsburgh. I went back for 4 years between 2010 and 2014 to care for my mom, kind of at her end of life period. Then she transitioned, and my cousin who lived in the Northwest came to visit because she was doing some family research, and her grandparents and my grandparents and my mom grew up in a small town in southern Pennsylvania, small coal mining town near the West Virginia border. And she wanted to go down there and do some research at the town library or something. So she stayed with me and we drove down, and got some information and found out some places where my grandparents lived and her grandparents, they were siblings, and drove around. And then we went to this one place that my grandpa owned. It was some kind of gas station, little general store or something. And we were standing there looking. It was on a kind of a busy corner, and there's a red light, and we were looking across the street at this big white house, which was very unique. It was like a big Victorian. It looked kind of spooky. It would be a good house for today. And Wendy, my cousin, went to turn around and walk back inside the building, which is now like a muffler shop or something. And I was still looking at the White House, and I happened to notice this car that was driving on the side street that crossed right in front of me. And my uncle, my grandpa's youngest brother, was driving that car. And he has a very unusual profile. And I'm like, wow, there's Uncle Lawrence. And then I realized, no, wait, Uncle Lawrence is dead. He was killed in a car crash about 4 years before, driving on the freeway. I think they thought he had like a heart attack or something, or a stroke, and he crashed. And he was in ICU for a while, and then eventually they took him off life support and he died. But it was like, that was him going right by. It was the weirdest thing. So then Wendy and I went to look at a house that he had lived in when he was younger, after he moved out from his parents' house. And we were talking to the lady who owned this house, and she had bought it from the original owner, who had rented rooms out over the garage. And so we were saying, yeah, we think our uncle lived there. And we started talking to this lady, and it turns out that she used to live in that white house across the street from where my grandpa's little gas station was, in that big white Victorian house. It was so wild, and just such a weird coincidence. And so anyway, then I went home, and I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Pittsburgh, who's like very psychic, and I was telling her about how I saw my uncle. And I think my cousin thought I was just a little bit, like weird or something. And so she did kind of a check-in, and she's like, yeah, he didn't know. He didn't realize that he had transitioned. And so she kind of helped him kind of go off to the light and make that change. But yeah, it was a really interesting visit. And those two things really kind of, capped it off, I guess I'd say. So it's fun.
I have something to share. I don't think it's quite as involved as the stories I've been hearing. It's just a little thing here, but my experience of it was very real. And it was maybe about 7 years ago. I was working at my job. It was about 2 years before retirement, and I really, really hated my job. And I was counting the days to when I would be retired and free as hell. And I was always the first person at work by far. Somehow they let me come in a couple hours early, which I preferred. And I'd miss all the traffic going home. I could go right to the gym, could go home and have a life. So I was doing that. So when I would go into the building, it would feel kind of strange every day that I was the only one there. There was no vibration, nothing going on with other humans there. And then one day I left my office and I went just a little bit down the hall and made some copies. As I was returning to my office down this long hall, I saw what is called a shadow person. And when I saw that, I froze and my whole body just, you could feel all of this energy through my body. It was crazy. Um, and I, later on, I went home and looked things up about it and everything. And then it did happen one more time before I left there. I'd like to think that this shadow person was trying to scare the hell out of me so I would just quit my job and be free, but I don't know. But I looked it up. A shadow person is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living species, humanoid figure, sometimes interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity by believers in the paranormal or supernatural. And I don't get deep into all of this as far as studying and everything, but I am very open to it. And I really think that all of this stuff really happens. We're caught as humans in this tiny little bubble. It's way more than that, as we all know. And I'll conclude with Mary, your house is quite interesting behind you, but I just want you to know I'm never going to visit you. Okay.
This is actually from the series Wednesday. They filmed it in front. This piece is from a castle in Romania,
Ah,
a mansion in Romania.
yeah.
I love watching Wednesday, so this is my tip of the hat to Wednesday. Yeah.
And tell us a little more about what Wednesday, you said it's an Addams Family takeoff?
Yes, it's about the daughter Wednesday who is sent off to boarding school after she's been expelled for setting some piranhas into the school swimming pool. And she's out of the public school system and has to come here to Nevermore.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
very cute series, and the actress is fabulous.
I think I watched one episode of that and then never watched anything else more, but maybe I should give it another try.
The mom is played by Catherine Zeta-Jones. She plays Martin.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Cute.
Yeah.
So
I'm racking my brains trying to think of something, but
well, while you're thinking of something, I have one more little story.
good.
This is my husband passed 6 years ago. And prior to that, he had a brain injury and he was very obsessive compulsive about some things. And for 3 or 4 years, he was Brazilian, so he had a cute accent. The sweetie pie, you have seen my hat. You have seen my Basque hat. Some hat he bought in that Basque region. I said, no, I haven't seen your hat. It's like a beret and there's a little poof on the top. Go look in the closet. So I would, dutifully go look in the, no, can't find it. Get on a ladder. Okay, I'll get on a ladder, go look at all the shelves. And he would do this like 3 times a week. Have you seen my Basque hat? Go and look for his hat. And then on the day he died, they came and they took his body away. And I went back into our bedroom and the hat was on the floor.
Wow.
I'm sure he saw it when he was going up through the ceiling down to say, you see, it was in there.
Wow, weird.
Yeah.
Those are things like that are hard to explain or unexplainable, Yeah.
Yeah, that happened when my aunt transitioned also. She would always, after her husband died, she would always say like, "Oh, he left me a penny," on the floor or something. And then when she did, her kids came over to clean out her apartment, and sure enough, it was like the very end. They pretty much everything was cleaned out, and they walked into the living room, and there's a penny like laying right on in the middle of the floor that didn't seem like it was there earlier, but yeah. I'd love it when those things happen.
Yeah, I am visited by my father who died in 2011 periodically, and it goes in waves, and then I won't feel anything for 7, 8 months, and then all of a sudden, oh, he's very present. And I'm not talking verbally to him, although I'm thinking about doing that soon, but he's connecting with me. And I know a lot of people have these experiences, and I like to think I'm sure it's true. And it's not because I miss him and I have to have him in my life and everything. No, it just comes. It's
Mm.
great.
Right. Yeah. I don't necessarily think of those types of situations as ghost encounters, but I
Right.
mean, I guess maybe they are technically. But
True.
yeah, one day I remember I was chanting. I had a chanting CD going, and it was really just very intense. And for some reason, at the same time, I was missing many of my close high school friends had died, and when we were very young, mostly from like drugs and alcohol and violence. And I could never figure out like why they went and I didn't. How did I survive? Because I partied as hard as they did, but and so I started like crying. I was sitting in my dining room and listening to this music and just create this weird vibration. And I'm like, why am I still here? And all of a sudden, three of my closest friends who had transitioned were like right there in with me in the dining room, and they're like, "You're not done. You're not done. You're not done yet." It's like they were like screaming at me, kind of mentally or something. I didn't hear it, but I kind of felt there, and it was like, "Okay, okay, I'll accept that." It was so interesting.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just such another reminder that this finite us is just I don't want to say limited, but it's not all we are. It's
Right.
just a portion of our essence, our being.
I
Mhm.
think some of these encounters lead us to investigate phenomena that in turn leads us down a spiritual path. And 'cause I think that's what happened with me, that my grandma read cards and could, have precognitive dreams, and it made me be open to that so that when I was ready to take a spiritual path, I was open to what came to me. And that may be one of the reasons we're a party to these kinds of communications. They are doors.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, wherever I go, I'm always prompted. Like if I'm in Europe or if I go to some older city, I say, is this place haunted? Uh, I always just ask that question whether I feel anything or not. And almost like 9 times out of 10, they'll say, oh, I don't know, but there are some stories. Like sometimes you just have to ask.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be.
So if you were out shopping to buy a house and there was a house that looked very nice to you and you really thought you might want to buy it, and the real estate agent says, well, it's been on the market for a long time because the house is haunted. Nobody seems to want to buy it. Would you buy it?
Hey, tell me about this ghost. What is his nature? And of course, we can cross them over. Um, I work with a guy who calls on angels, angelic support to cross spirits over.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and I tend to attract them. Whenever I visit someplace, they always come back with an army. Well, they apparently know that I know this guy, so if they come with me, he can cross them over. Like word of mouth, I guess, on the other side.
Yeah, that happened not too long ago when we were down in Oregon City at that old house, a historical house from the late 1700s that was built in Oregon, the McLaughlin House. Christine, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then we went to the end of the Oregon Trail, which is kind of a site where I'm sure many Native Americans would gather, and then that's where a lot of the pioneers ended up. And Mary, boy, you had quite a few clasp onto you
I
after
did.
that little trip.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
I always just get home and I email William and say, I've got an emergency. Can you please help me cross these stills over? Because I just feel so oppressed sometimes when this happens. And when I was in Portugal last year, my stepdaughter and I drove up to Spain to oh, to one of the shrines, and which had also been the site of a lot of the burnings at the Inquisition.
Mm,
And I came back from Europe with over 1,000,
wow.
and it was
1,000.
spirits,
Wow.
and
Wow.
they just latch on, and it I can feel them enter,
Mm.
but it can be really dark. So William is there on call for me. It's very helpful.
Where did you know him from? Where did you find him? Or
He has a practice called Healing Key Way, and he helps you deal with the trauma that come forward with you from past lives.
Hmm.
But he also works with angels. But he's a licensed therapist, and also, he deals with it from both directions. That standard therapy, but also recognizing that all the trauma that we have isn't necessarily from this life.
Mm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been very good for me, because goodness knows, pick it up like blotting paper. So
Wish I had a story to tell.
Well, this is Nancy. I'm Mary's sister.
yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
Nancy.
Hi.
Hi. I've got someone coming to the door soon to get some kittens I'm giving away, which is
Hmm.
priority over this. So unless you guys want kittens, but this is one of my mother's stories. Our father was in the war, World War II, and in New Guinea, and the war's over, and he's coming home. And at that time, there were just certain places where the men were transported to, and then they could get home on their own. And my mother was trying to figure out where, was it going to be a plane or a train or what? Because then she could kind of figure out where to be. So they had a Ouija board session, and she asked, "How will my husband be coming home?" And the Ouija board said, "In pajamas."
Oh, wow.
And it turned out he'd gotten malaria and was on a hospital ship, and
Wow.
came out on a stretcher in his pajamas. And
that
however, if
partic-
Ouija boards were true, I'd be married to Paul McCartney right now. But
That sounded like Mary.
and he's had a couple chances, let me tell you. But
gotta be in the right.
it's been really fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sometime I'll tell you the rest of that Ouija board story, which caused my mother to go home and burn the silly thing.
Oh, but maybe next week we'll do that.
Yeah.
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 Well, my
Well-
girlfriend does it, works. Just when I was in LA, we did a Ouija board, and but she told me things about my niece, health things, and my husband, regarding their health. Nothing, very interesting. Oh, time's up.
It's time for us to go. And
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
please like and share us when you see us on YouTube, as we want more fans.
Yes. Happy Halloween, everybody. See you next week. Thanks,
Hey.
Melanie. I'm glad you could join us today.